She disappeared for 6 years, leaving her husband without an explanation. She was declared dead, and he built a new life with another. But when fate had already put everything in its place, she returned. Now 2 women found themselves in a courtroom where not only inheritance is at stake, but also the truth about love, betrayal, and second chances. A will signed for one can destroy the world of another. A story that begins with disappearance and ends with the struggle for the right to be alive. Chapter 1. The Last Letter from James. Court of Fulton County, Georgia. In a tall building with a glass facade, where the air always smells of coffee from the nearest coffee shop and freshly printed cases, something more than just a trial was about to begin this morning. It was a drama where reality bordered on the impossible. Kate Brooks was standing in front of the door with the sign Courtroom #3. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to keep her back straight. She is wearing a dark blue jacket and a white blouse. Her appearance was neat, but there was a storm in her eyes. 6 years of silence. 6 years of loneliness and self-discovery. And now this hall, where her life will be considered as a business. Miss Brooks, the voice of the court clerk brought her back to reality. Kate nodded. She took a deep breath, as if diving into deep water, and went inside. A woman in black was already sitting in the hall. Refined suit, restrained makeup, hands folded on knees. She wasn't looking at Kate. It was Cassandra White. Judge Martha Harris appeared from a side door with a look of calm determination on her face. She sat down, nodded to the sides, and began. Today we are considering Civil Case No. 1280 on the renewal of the deadline for acceptance of inheritance. The plaintiff is Kate Brooks. The defendant is Cassandra White. Let's start with the testimony of the plaintiff. Kate stood up. There was silence in the hall. My name is Kate Brooks. 6 years ago, I left Atlanta and went to Savannah. It was a decision dictated by an internal crisis. My husband, James Brooks, and I had not been close for several years at the time, but I never stopped loving him. The judge raised an eyebrow. Did you know that you were declared dead? Kate shook her head. No, Your Honor. I found out about it only a month and a half ago when I returned to our apartment and saw that another woman was living there. She said she was his wife. Glances crossed. Cassandra still kept her eyes on the table in front of her. Did you know that your husband died? Asked the judge. No. I learned this the same day. Neighbors told me, and that evening I found a letter from James. He left it in case I ever came back. The judge leaned forward. What was in the letter? Kate pulled out a yellowed envelope. Her voice trembled. Kate, if you're reading this, then you're back after all, so I won't be able to hug you anymore. But no, I didn't hold a grudge. I always waited, always loved. A silence that no one dared to break. Even the air seemed frozen, and in this silence, a story was born that would destroy someone's life. Let's continue, said the judge quietly. But it is already clear it will be a difficult matter. Chapter 2. Disappearance. As Judge Harris jotted down notes in her notebook, Kate felt her memories rush back into her consciousness like a raging current. She was no longer in the courtroom. She was standing on the platform of the station in Atlanta, holding in her hands a small suitcase and a ticket to Savannah. It was warm, and the sun burned her cheeks, but in her soul the rain was raging. 6 years ago, she simply disappeared. Without notice, no goodbye, without a note. Why did you go? The judge's voice rang out in the hall again. Why didn't they tell your husband? Kate gasped. She had to explain, though she wasn't sure she could find the right words. Then I felt broken. I was at a dead end. My career was flying into the abyss. I lost my child, and a wall was formed between me and James. He was present physically, but emotionally we were on different shores. I felt that I was drowning, and the only thing she could do was run away. Couldn't you just tell him about it? The voice of the defendant's lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, appeared again. I was afraid. I was afraid of his look. I was afraid to once again see disappointment in his eyes. I couldn't stand it. In Savannah, Kate rented a room near the coast. She lived under a different name, worked in a small cafe, read many books, and listened to the surf at night. It was the treatment she chose for herself. But the years passed, and every day of silence only deepened the gap between her and home. A year after your disappearance, the judge continued, Mr. Brooks filed a missing persons report. Subsequently, you were declared missing, disappeared, and a few years later legally dead. Did you know about it? No, Your Honor. I had no idea. I didn't watch the news. She did not go to social networks. I really disappeared. Do you realize that your disappearance had consequences not only for you? Kate nodded, and this time sincerely. I saw it in Cassandra's eyes. Pain, anger. She didn't say a single bad word, but I understood. While I was looking for myself, she was by his side when he was dying. And this is the truth, which I cannot deny. The judge leaned towards the microphone. Let's continue. Mr. Jenkins, I speak to you. Now we want to hear what the disappearance of Kate Brooks looked like through the eyes of Cassandra White. The hall froze. The second act of the drama began. Chapter 3. The New Life of James. Cassandra rose from the bench, slowly and with dignity, as if weighing each movement, as well as each word she had to say. Her posture was straight, her eyes as cold as morning ice. She walked over to the witness stand and nodded to Judge Harris. Tell the court what you were to Mr. Brooks, demanded Attorney Jenkins. I was his wife, Cassandra said. Legal wife. We got married a year and a half ago. But before that, we were together for almost 5 years. I was there when he underwent chemotherapy. I held his hand when he lost his hair. I rubbed his forehead when he vomited from the medicine. I took him to the clinic when he could barely stand. I was his family. Her voice did not tremble, but there was an emotion in the air, thick as a fog. Kate lowered her eyes. She imagined James sick, weak, and with someone else. How did you meet? Jenkins continued. Through mutual acquaintances. It was at a charity evening in support of cancer patients. Then he was already alone. He said that his wife had disappeared. At first he hoped she would return. But every year that light in his eyes faded. When she was declared dead, he surrendered and began to live on. Judge Harris interjected. Miss White, did you know that Mr. Brooks could have mentioned Kate in his will? Cassandra sighed, looking down. Yes, he told me about it. He made a will before our marriage. She was there. He didn't want to change it. He said, if she ever returns, it means that fate has decreed it that way. And it didn't offend you? The judge raised an eyebrow. It was insulting. But I loved him. Not for papers. Not for an apartment. I knew that the memory of Kate still lived in his heart. But I did not compete with the ghost. I was just there. An oppressive silence reigned in the hall. Cassandra added quietly, I'm not saying she's bad. Maybe she really had a hard time. But James was dying. And while she was looking for herself, he held my hand. I'm not asking for pity. I am asking for justice. The judge turned the page of the case. Her gaze became even more attentive. We heard both sides. Then there are the documents. And then we will return to the point. Who has the right to inherit the woman who was the first or the one who was the last? Chapter 4. Return of the Dead. The first evening after Kate returned to Atlanta, she stood in front of the door of the apartment on Chestnut Avenue, the same one where she and James had once laughed, dined, been silent after arguments, and reconciled after silence. She had the key, the same one she kept in the secret pocket of her suitcase all these years, and the castle doesn't seem to have changed. Vona inserted the key. Click. The door opened. But this was no longer her home. There were new shoes in the hall. Other people's photos hung on the wall, and from the depths of the apartment, a soft cry reached her. Kate froze in place. Who is there? Came a woman's voice. Kate came in. Her heart was beating so hard that every step echoed in her head. A woman in a black sweater with a scarf on her head was sitting in the kitchen. The eyes are red, hands clasped on a cup of tea. This is my home, Kate whispered. The woman raised her eyes, and she said exactly. This was your home. James is no more, and I am his widow. Kate took a step back, but didn't leave. I'm Kate Brooks. I am his wife. And I am Cassandra. We got married a year and a half ago. You have no right to be here. Legally, you are dead. These very words became the beginning of the court case. The next day, Kate learned that her name had disappeared from the state registers. She still had her passport, but in all the databases she had been dead for several years. She spent days in the migration department, in registration institutions, in queues and offices, proving, I am alive. Every morning she woke up with the thought that it was all just a strange dream. But the dream did not pass. Her story was checked. Signature, voice, DNA were compared. And 2 weeks later, it's official. Kate Brooks is alive again for the state. But her husband is dead, and someone else managed to take her place. In court, she handed the judge a package of documents proof that she exists. Marriage certificate, first passport, photos, letter from James, and also a request to the notary chamber where his will was registered, the will in which she was the heir. Have you submitted an application for renewal of the term of acceptance of inheritance? Asked the judge. Yes, Your Honor. I have a legal right. I did not know that I was pronounced dead, and I didn't know that James had died. The judge nodded and put the documents aside. The next meeting is the evaluation of the evidence and the will. Meanwhile, a break, and again silence, like after an explosion, a silence in which only memories lived. Chapter 5. Doubts and Testimonies. There was a silent tension in the hall again. The air was thick, as if saturated with unanswered questions. Everyone was waiting. Judge Harris flipped through the documents. Her fingers rhythmically tapped the cover of the case, but there was no trace of emotion on her face. Miss Brooks, she said, you're making a will. Original document signed by James Brooks stating that all property is to be inherited by you. Are you sure of its authenticity? Kate nodded. I saw how he signed it. It was a few months before my departure. He didn't tell me about it directly, but I knew he was up to something. After losing his child, he changed. We have both changed. And yet you left, said Attorney Jenkins. You disappeared, without a word, and your husband didn't know if you were alive. He searched for you, filed a missing person report, and then a dead report. Doesn't this indicate that your marriage is effectively over? Kate was silent for a few seconds. Then she looked into the eyes of the judge. Things happen in life that cannot be explained logically. I was not running away from him, but from myself. I was in a broken state. And yes, I was wrong not to say anything. But I did not betray him. I simply disappeared, like a person who no longer knew who she was. Cassandra sighed. She sat motionless like a rock, but something dimly flashed in her eyes. I want to say, she suddenly said, standing up, if possible. The judge nodded without changing her expression. I don't want to turn this into a competition between two women, Cassandra began. But I saw the death of James. I woke up in the middle of the night when he couldn't breathe. I talked to the doctors when they gave us months, and then weeks. I sat by his bed when he could no longer speak. And in those moments he did not remember about Kate. He just squeezed my hand. The judge looked at Cassandra carefully, but said nothing. Her silence is a space for both women. But Cassandra lowered her voice. When I found a letter addressed to Kate in his desk, I realized that a part of his heart always belonged to her. I don't mind, but I also lived with him, loved him, lost him, and I don't think I deserve any less. The judge closed the file. The court will take a break. The next hearing is a consideration of the legal consequences of recognizing the plaintiff's death and the validity of the will. And again, a dark corridor. And again, walls that keep the secrets of two women and one man who is no longer among the living. Chapter 6. Law and Justice. When the court resumed after the break, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed. It was no longer a scene of emotional drama. Now it is the law's turn. Judge Harris returned to the case with that reserved, cool determination that made her famous in legal circles. On her desk are the texts of laws extracts from registers, certificates, and conclusions. No personal emotions, just the facts. The court is ready to hear both sides regarding the legality of the inheritance will and the circumstances of its application, she announced, looking at the space between the two women. Kate's lawyer stood up first. Your Honor, we have the original will dated 3 years before Miss Brooks' disappearance. It clearly names her as the sole heiress of all the property of James Brooks. The document was kept in a private notary archive, its authenticity was confirmed, and the signature was verified by expert examination. The judge nodded. However, added Attorney Jenkins, standing up from the other side, there is a legal complication. Miss Kate Brooks was officially pronounced dead at the time of Mr. Brooks' death, and it was on the basis of this status that he entered into a new marriage with my client, Cassandra White. So was the will valid if the person for whom it was made did not legally exist at the time? This was the heart of the matter, a question that carried more than just a legal dilemma. It touched the essence of law. Does a person who is dead in the eyes of the system have the right to become alive again, not only physically, but also legally? You say, the judge turned to Kate, that they didn't know you were declared dead? Yes, Your Honor. All these years I lived on the outskirts of Savannah, under a different name, without connection to the outside world. It was my escape. But I was not aware that I was declared dead, and even more so that he passed away. But at the same time, did you know that you had a legal marriage? Of course. I never filed for divorce, and never planned. I just didn't know how to turn back. The judge looked at both women. One held proudly, almost like a stone. The other looked vulnerable but resolute. The law requires consistency. A person cannot be dead and alive at the same time. And if a person disappears, does not show signs of life, does not fulfill marital obligations, he himself brings himself under legal invisibility. Kate clenched her fists. Her heart was pounding, but she was silent. However, the judge paused. There are circumstances that can soften the formal approach. And here everything depends on whether we recognize Kate's return as a good reason to renew the term of succession. This decision is not only legal. This is a question of justice, and it was to become decisive in the next chapter. Chapter 7. Appeal. The courtroom fell silent again as Judge Harris delivered her ruling. Her voice was even, emotionless, as befits a person who passes judgment not only by law, but also by conscience. The court, taking into account all the provided evidence, testimony of witnesses, as well as in the context of legal norms, does not find sufficient grounds for restoring the deadline for accepting the inheritance. In accordance with current law, Kate Brooks' claims are dismissed. The case is closed. Kate did not immediately understand what had happened. Her thoughts froze. She sat motionless, staring straight ahead, as if the decision was made not for her, but for someone else. It wasn't until the judge got up and left the courtroom that reality dawned on her. Cassandra was not angry. She simply gathered her things, nodded to the lawyer, and silently left. Not a look, not a gesture in Kate's direction. Only a shadow on the face, perhaps sympathy, perhaps fatigue. Kate was left alone on the bench. Her fingers slid over the envelope containing James' letter. She took it out again and read it aloud, though no one else heard. I hold no grudge. I have always waited, always loved. These words did not change anything, but they were real, and there is something in this. The same evening, Kate was sitting in a coffee shop across from the courthouse, wrapped in a coat, hot coffee in hand. Outside the window, cars were speeding by, the traffic lights were flashing red, and everything around was living its usual life, completely ignoring the fact that something had ended for her. Will you file an appeal? Asked her lawyer, sitting across from her. She nodded. Yes, not because I want an apartment or money, and because I want to be heard. I want my voice, my pain, my return to have meaning. If I am already alive again, then I have to fight for the right to exist. He nodded, without further ado. With this new resolve, with a new shadow in her heart, Kate began another battle. The battle for recognition, for justice, for myself. And although James was gone, his last letter became her promise. She lived again, so she had the right to fight. The appeal is just the beginning. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier.